Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's 12 minutes after 5, a couple minutes late here. We have Councillor Burrows joining us online. Can you hear us, Councillor?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. With that, I will move to the adoption of the agenda. Anything extra from administration?
Just the reorganization of that one item, but
Yeah, we'll move 7.5 to the start just for time here. Anything extra from council? Not seeing any. If I can get a motion to move the agenda. Councillor Williams? Wilhelm?
I'll make a motion that council adopts the governance parties committee as amended.
Question in favor? Carried. I'm going to head down to 7.5. We'll get this one out of the way for Mrs. Anderson.
Good evening, Leaving Council. Before you this evening is policy 1907, volunteer and senior appreciation. We are recommending to rescind this policy. This policy was first created on November 21st of 2000. It was amended on April 18th, 2017 to take our events, our seniors appreciation and volunteer appreciation biannually. And so recently the Community Services Committee has been reviewing our policies for relevancy, and this year is also our volunteer appreciation year, and we've changed the names of the awards just to bring up more with the industry standards and such. So just based on this discussion with my committee and with Matthew, Arceo, and Joan, we've decided that is this policy even relevant? Do we need a policy to guide this event? And just a few discussion points that is in your RFD. Would you like me to go over all of them? Has everybody read? I can take time to read them all to you if you like.
I think we're pretty good. Everybody should have read their package.
Okay.
Councillor Burrows, you any comments on or questions you have on this? I see you're online there, so.
No, I don't think so.
Councillor Wilhelm.
So we did have a conversation about this at the community services meeting, and we agreed with the RFD as it was then. So I'll make a motion that the governance priority policy 1907 volunteer and senior appreciation to recommend council to rescind the policy.
Thank you, Councillor. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. Call the question in favor. That's passed. We'll move back up to 6.1, policy review 3203, dust control.
Do we want to adopt the previous agenda? Sorry, 3 minutes.
Sorry, I missed their adoption of the minutes. 3.1, thank you, Councillor. G&P committee of October 16th. Anybody see anything there we need to discuss, or do you want to make a motion?
Okay.
Councillor Wilhelm.
I'll motion that the committee adopts the minutes of the governance parties committee October 16th, 2024.
Thank you for the clarification, Councillor. With that, I call the question in favor. That's passed. Okay, 6.1, policy review of the dust control. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. We're here tonight to present to you an amendment to the dust control policy 3203. This was a request by council on the October 23rd, 2024 meeting. The primary focus of this review is to standardize and synchronize dust control and road stabilization processes for our residents across the county. Administration has also taken this opportunity to review other counties' practices to identify improvement ideas and thoughts. Some of the areas of improvement of the current policy include, number one, the current policy is silent on informing the public on what roads or road segments county will pay for dust control and road stabilization. Number two, the current policy can be enhanced by categorizing the various dust control and road stabilization uses based on the triggers. Number three, the current policy can be updated to introduce the use of road stabilization products to achieve a higher level of service, which the current policy is silent on. And lastly, the current policy can be enhanced by introducing a potential refund mechanism if the applicant paid dust control limits overlaps with the road road stabilization limits. At the March 2nd, 2022 council meeting, council adopted a current, the council provide direction that county shall fund dust control on Quebec's road between the West Mountain intersection and Range Road 123 to promote recreation traffic. There were no other locations approved by council for county-funded dust control. Based on available records, it appears that county also applied dust abatement on Woodlands Lane, just in front of our office here, the county shops, Blue Ridge Recreation Area access, 2 residents on Ranger 130 that's going towards Harlech Canyon, in front of the cemetery gravel pit when there's a county hall operation, and other locations for ad hoc road stabilization reasons in the past, and county would have been funded those dust control and stabilization efforts in the past. With this new amendment, county will continue the past practices, but will post the information for clarity for our residents on differentiating what is paid by county, what is not. If the draft amended policy is approved, changes to county website would need to be made prior to March 15th, 2025, which is the date that application to resident request of dust control will become available. Schedule of fees by law will need to be reviewed and updated prior to the 2026 budget. We're off the cycle this year, but next year we'll make sure that's being reviewed to achieve the result of this policy to be a full cost recovery. The current fees is a bit low and underrepresenting the true cost of recovery of the services. And lastly, selective road stabilization process will be based on the gravel road condition improvement program presentation provided to Governance and Priorities Committee in October last year. And I would stress the point, it's selective road stabilization. I'm sure residents will be curious why we're only doing portions of a road. The program's intent is selective stabilization at troubled areas, not intended for the whole road. And we will be doing the selection ourselves. Following the approval of this draft amended policy, administration will be developing internal procedures to document how this selection process for road stabilization is intended to work. Procedures do not require council approval, but will be made available to public. The attachments, I have attached three different versions of the document. The first document is the current policy. A second document is the track change version of the current policy and the proposed policy. And the last document is a clean copy of the new revised policy. We do believe the new draft revised policy will address all the improvement ideas that we identified before. Thank you very much, and open to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Council, any questions, comments? Councilor Will?
Through the chair to administration, just a quick question on, I was rolling through, just reviewing the document, and the new updated revision references to a schedule of fees, but we obviously haven't adopted that schedule. So are we just going to utilize the previous year's schedule of fees for 2025 and then adopt a new schedule of fees for 2026? Or like it just, with regards to how that's going to work for 2025?
Through the chair, Councilor Wilhelm, the current posted schedule of fees on county website was passed in 2023. That was remain in effect until we pass another bylaw to rescind and replace it. So generally, what you want to do a fee schedule or schedule fees review as part of your budget process, or even before your budget process, so you can identify your intended revenue. We sort of missed that schedule last year, so it will become we'll try to bring that back into cycle this year in October and November this year.
I just wanted to know how that was gonna work, because we're obviously we're looking to adopt a new policy, but with a very shortened time frame on when people can actually apply for it. So I wanted to know how it's gonna work from a resident side, because I have a few in my division that I think still apply for it occasionally, so they asked me, I want to be able to answer. Thank you.
One question I do have, and this is in regards to the public delegation that we had here, probably a month ago, when we were talking in regards to dust control and stabilization. And we were doing a portion of the hill up to where the resident was then doing dust control in front of the property. And sounds like, majority of it kind of being on the hill could all be looked at as hill stabilization. I'm just wondering how the new policy would help clarify some of that, or kind of work with, we'll say the example that was given to us by the resident.
To the church, we are not trying to address that particular situation. However, in general, in our plan in May after spring runoff, our staff will be told how to do through the program last year and identify road segments that's rough and needs equipment to road stabilization. So typically areas hill intersections, there's a lot of turning movement. That's generally where you're going to find rough roads. But we will be identifying those exact limits either through a lath or stake pounded in the roadside, or make up a map showing the exact locations so that people know what the county is going to pay for road stabilization. And if they already paid for dust control for the overlapped, if there's dust control segments overlap with our stabilization segments, they may get a prorated refund out of that.
Right. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Burrows?
Yeah, so I guess part of my question through the chair is the product that you have that's typically been getting used in the road stabilization and the dust control is the same product. And how do you, as a resident, know that, how do you compare a level of service when you say the county's not doing dust control in these areas, but then they'll say, well, we recommend that we're actually doing some road stabilization in this area, and then by default you end up with a higher level of service because you've got dust control now where others don't. So this was part of the policy that I guess was a little confusing for residents to figure out.
Through the chair to Council Burrows, the timing isn't perfect because we need to do the road stabilization visit after snow melt, and by that time people's application to dust control has already closed. We also need that process to finish before May so we can organize resources for the application of dust control in May or early June. So there's going to be some conflict in there. However, by making it clear to people which roads may receive road stabilization, and by providing the results of our assessment on road stabilization in late May, the intent is that will make it clear to people if they would qualify for a refund. That's the balance that we can find.
Yeah, and I understand that part, but the if you've got a fairly high if you've got a traveled road that's getting stabilization, you're automatically getting dust control, right?
Through the Chair, Councilor Burrows, not necessarily. For example, Retro 120, I'll use that as an example, a total of 5 kilometers. There's no plan to do an entire 5 kilometers of road stabilization. We have to travel the road in identify selectively will be applied. So it's residents on that road that will be benefited from the application of road stabilization, because that's right outside their house. There will be residents that will not be benefited. The intent is the road stabilization is triggered by road condition, not because people live on the side of the road.
Yep, I understand that. Okay, I give up.
Councillor Wilhelm, and then, Councillor Wilhelm, Councillor Preston.
I think what Councilor Bros is trying to say is you're unintentionally causing an increase in service level in certain sections of roads, or certain residents are going to see that. So what he's mostly worried about is the fallout, or not, that's not what he's worried about, but that he foresees fallout occurring from that, right? You've got resident Smith here just happens to live on a hill, so they're going to have dust control in front of their house, or they're going to have stabilization, which is in some ways, sometimes is going to be the exact same thing as the dust control, whereas you have other residents that won't have. So I think he's just foreseeing, and I can foresee it too, there will be questions asked, right? I mean, you're transparent as possible. We're hoping that helps with that situation, but I can see that situation that he's raising up here. I'm not sure how we solve that.
Councillor Prestige?
Yes, through the chair to administration. The problem is we have one product doing two different jobs. And when residents sees it's the same product, they're going, well, my neighbor not paying for, he's using the same product and getting dust control plus stabilization, and I have to pay for dust control. And it's the same product. I know I would be choked if that was in front of my house.
I think it comes down to communication from administration as to what the application, the reasoning for, the reasoning road. And as long as we're open and transparent as to why we're using this product and the reasoning for why we're using it in this section versus why somebody else, possibly had to pay for it, I think will be beneficial. Jeff, and then Councillor Wilhelm.
If through the chair to council, if the concern is to differentiate between the two different products, we can easily find two separate products to be used, if that helps the differentiation. Because
to your point on that though, do you see a better cost benefit running the one product that does both, or is it more cost effective to run two separate chemicals?
to the chair, generally the road stabilization products are more pricier than the dust control one. It's hard to say, because if you run two separate products, you may end up with not a full load that you're going to use, so there may be some wastage. Whereas if you run the same product for both applications, you have the economy of scale, but then you lose the differentiation piece. I don't think the cost is something that's too significant and we need to pay too much attention. I'm just offering if the concern is to help differentiate, we can use the different product as differentiation to show what is for what.
But even to that, I think from the resident standpoint, if they're just seeing something applied on the road, they're not going to differentiate the difference between one product or the other either. Councillor Wilhelm, you had your hand up.
I was just going to follow up what we've asked Jeff and the infrastructure group to do is to bring our service level up on these roads to what we would consider to be a minimum. So we have these problem sections, hills, intersections. I think the policy here, as presented, could create a situation, as Councilor Barreau says, but I don't know if there's a equitable solution. Like we still want the roads to be drivable and at least a minimum service level. Some residents will see some benefits from it. I think the majority of residents will see the benefits from just having our roads meeting a minimum service level anyways. I don't know how we get around some of these few situations, so I think the policy as it is should be good. And if in this year we see some issues with it, we can maybe review the policy again in 2026 and make changes as needed.
Priorities Committee forward draft policy 3203 dust control to council for consideration.
Thank you, Counselor. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any, I'll call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's carried. Thank you. Let's move down 7.1, Municipal Policy Handbook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just as part of the overall developing a proper understanding of everything that's going on here, part of it is reviewing our policies and making sure that we're on track. And what I was struggling with to some degree was our policy handbook. Our current policy from 2001 indicates we should only have 10 sections within our overall policy handbook. The one on my desk has 28 sections. And so there's just some discrepancies on where we were going, and we've been in this process of continually trying to update. There's a large number of policies that have procedural steps, and in the discussions with different staff members, they've also indicated that there's some bottlenecks when it comes to updating standards, standing operating procedures and things like that, because they all go through council. So just trying to clarify, what's a policy, and what council expects in it, who's responsible for what, and just developing what I believe will be a more simplified structure, to limit it down from the 28 systems we have to about 10 with some subsections. And just rather than having a defined template, just having some defined expectations from council of what's in those documents. The problem with having a template approved by council is anytime we want to tweak it just to make it easier, then we're bringing it back here, and you probably don't care where we change a certain location of something if the content's the same. So this policy aims to set those standards, also outline where policies are going to be stored for staff and the public. And it also recognizes a transition level, that there is going to be a significant transition of getting all our policies to the current but that those other ones will still be in effect until we do. And if you're okay with that structure, then we can start rolling out a greater aspect of updating these policies and just getting procedures where they're procedural, so get you out of the operational weeds that have currently in some of your policies. Also giving me the ability, potentially, if you agree with the structure, to deal with HR matters. So long term, rather than them being a county policy, it's a direction that the policy properly representing the operations of the county. Within the document, I've attached the policies that would most likely be rescinded should you support this idea. And so that's a high level. I can go down into a greater detail of the significant changes, but high level, it is just to create a new structure for our policy documents and better distinguish some of the roles, as well as the bare bones of what needs to be in a policy, a procedure, or a standard.
Any questions from council? Any discussion? Not seeing any. You must make a motion.
I'll make a motion that Council Priorities Committee policy council for consideration.
Thank you, Counselor. Scott, I'll call the question. All in favor? It's carried.
In favor.
7.2, corporate planning tools.
So this just better outlines the policy that hopefully you just said to bring to council. It outlines who staff-wise is responsible for what. It truly flushes out when we should be using a procedure, a standard. As where the other one just said, this is what's in the document. This says these are the intents of these different things. It outlines where I have the ability to establish policies or procedures where our directors do. I think Jeff and Joan would be better suited to establish their staff-specific procedures and standards for their specific tasks than anyone else. And this recognizes the role that they play. It also gives us the ability to make generic amendments and also to update and renumber our policies so long as we are not doing a significant change to the documents, to just amend them to a new format, or if we see a basic grammatical error or anything, just going to fix it rather than bring it here to say we have an issue with it. As long as it doesn't overall shift the structure of the document. And so this kind of outlines where we will all be working when it comes to corporate planning policies. And I don't know, I think it's a good next step to distinguish between the role of council's policies and the operational rules. If there's concerns when it comes to rescinding policies or us just going hog wild on coming up with a new procedure that you're not aware of, we will still have to bring back policies that are in place for you to rescind. And my hope is whenever we're doing that, we will also provide you proof with the procedure or the standard to show that the intent of the original policy isn't lost. If there's a procedural change from an operations point of view, then we would also be informing council because you set that service level, and we'll make sure that you're aware of changes to operations. And so that potential concern, it's a valid concern, but as long as we inform you properly, and you will still have to rescind the policies once we have the alternative in place, I think that's going to allow for a collaborative discussion between all parties.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Willem?
Through the chair to administration. So just with regards to when you're explaining the mechanism on how you would potentially change a policy with a minor adjustment or not dramatically, I just wonder if we could, potentially flesh out that
Of course.
idea a little bit onto what is a minor adjustment, or because it does essentially give you a lot of leeway to change a policy and then say, oh, well, we thought this was minor, and then maybe council didn't consider something like that to be minor. So if you could, I think just for everybody's clarification, understanding what you mean by minor changes, like you kind of stated a couple of them, like grammatical changes and stuff like that does fall within. But I think at least defining that within the policy itself would help with that discussion.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Anything else? Councillor Burrows?
Nope, I'm good.
Sorry, you were small on the screen there. I wasn't sure if you were trying to get my attention there.
Nope.
Councillor Prestige, anything? And just for me, as long as, we're talking about the procedure on how we handle the matters and how it still comes to council, as long as that's still captured, so it's not that, we'll say administration's gonna run with it, but different councils, different ideas. If you take the gray out and you have something procedurally written for how things work, it makes it hard to kind of go back and forth on, so.
Absolutely.
With that, if Councillor Wilhelm?
I'll motion that the GNP committee forward the corporate planning tools to council for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that one carried. 7 point.
This is just an information item of the policies and bylaws that we're currently working to get before you. Part of it is as part of the closed session item, just to recognize that the limits we have in this committee may pose some issues with delays and that sort of thing. So just more of a, hey, this is what we're working on behind the scenes, so you're aware that we got a lot going on outside day-to-day operations.
Thank you. Anything in this council wants to talk about? Councillor Prestige?
I'll make a motion that council accept the policy and bylaw update as information.
Thank you, Councillor. With that, I'll call the question. All in favor? That one's carried. 7.4 purchasing policy.
Perfect. So as part of your strategic and tactical plans, one of the items to update was our purchasing policy. So we went through it, we've updated the various sections in relation to the new names for the various trade agreements. We've also increased the purchasing power and created some new spending limits for some members of staff. We had certain situations where staff members needed to actively purchase goods and services for running their programs and that sort of thing, but had no authority to do it. And when good examples are our rec and our FCS coordinator or economic development officer, where they didn't have enough authorities to properly get what they needed to do their job, even though it was fully budgeted, and they were left to rely on other people with proper purchasing authority to get those minor items. The other aspect of it is we're increasing the purchasing limits to reflect the proper tender requirements within the new trade agreements. And then just the signing authority for certain dollar amounts, so we're clarifying. High level, the other things we've introduced is a local business component. It says we should encourage to prioritize county businesses where we can, assuming they are within a specific target range of price. It's not significant. I believe it's as long as they're within 2% of the lowest bid, we might as well prioritize our ratepayers that way as a thought. It is compliant with the current trade agreements and that sort of stuff, the way it's worded. There's also a clarification when it comes to how we do our emergency purchasing policies. It better defines in the event of an emergency and what an emergency is, how we at a director level can allow for quicker decision making rather than the past policy, which did delay that. High level, without going through every potential change that we have, and there is a summary sheet within the background that highlights the biggest changes. Those are the 4 or 5 largest changes to the policy overall.
Thank you. Any discussion from council? Councilor Burrows?
Can you just take me through, what is it, page 6 at the top, and the goods and services portion, or okay, formal tender. So minimum 3 quotes, RFQ, or formal tender, or request for proposal. Formal tender, again, that process is?
That is through APC.
APC.
Alberta Purchasing Connection, yeah.
So that's, you put it to a,
completely open bid process through the provincial tendering portal.
okay, so I guess my question would be, how does, because I know we've used Canoe on a few, like, for example, a fire truck. So how do you use one over the other? Because
So if I may, just for clarification, the question is, when do we trigger Alberta Purchasing Connection versus a formal tender RFP, being that they could be the same thing?
well, like, they're kind of different programs. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. When you can use one over the other, and if you do use Canoe, are you breaching the protocol of your own policy with the formal requests and the request for proposals and request for tenders?
Mr. Chair, just in relation to that, I think it's just the flexibility. As this is a policy, my plan would be that procedurally, we bring back a procedure that outlines in greater detail. The original draft of not the original draft. The current purchasing policy also outlined the full policy, the full procedure on different tendering documents and when we trigger it and that sort of thing. My intent would be that once this policy is adopted, we accordingly bring back the procedure, which is that purchasing manual is what it's called within the current document. And so that will outline where and when we distinguish between a formal tender, an RFP, or APC. And Jeff may have better insight than myself as well.
Through Chair to Councilor Burrows, on the specific question of Canoe, Canoe has already gone through an open tender process for us. So if there is a service category on Canoe that offers the goods that we want to buy, that's the more time efficient place to go first before go to an open tender, because it's already been tendered and it's trade agreement compliant. Where we will find challenges is in construction and engineering in those areas that generally Canoe does not have a defined and open tender process for us to tap into, and we have to go open tender. You raised the question of buying vehicles and fire trucks. Canoe is generally my first stop, Shelda's first stop, because it offers the fast track service to get something ordered. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that was my hypothetical, because I know I just didn't want the policy trapping us into that 3-quote thing, and then you've got to go through and score the machinery, and in reality, like, you know, having in my experience doing fleet maintenance, for ease of operator training and safety moving between pieces of equipment, you're much better off to have fleet commonality. And, you know, rather than getting a Volvo because it was the best price and a Deere and then mixing a case in with it. So I'm just trying to make sure that we are reflecting the policy. Thanks.
Councillor Wilhelm?
Through the chair to administration. So not a comment, or sorry, not a suggestion or anything, just a comment. I really appreciate the portion where we talk about the local business component. I had asked about this probably 3 years ago with regards to purchasing and all that kind of stuff, and I was told that we could not focus on local business. So I wasn't really given a solid reason as to why we could not do that, but it's good to see that we're incorporating this into our policy making, because I think it is very important. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Anything else from council?
I just have one other question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, John.
If the proposed, back to page 6 again, expenditure is what, 45,000, not greater than, 50,000. If the proposed unbudgeted expenditure is not an emergency and doesn't exceed 50, can do it if there's a surplus in the approved budget. So, a surplus in the section of the approved budget or the entire municipal budget?
It's not an emergency, does not see. The intent there is within the section, like the operational unit.
Can
So I can
we
clarify
make that clarification? The only reason that I want to make sure that that's clarified is I don't think council's going to have a problem if they say that, you know, we allocated $2 million in equipment and you went, you had a $50,000 room in the equipment and you ended up doing something in the equipment side. But when you're making larger budget decisions, I hope I'm making sense here, but.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. Councillor Wilhelm?
I will motion that the GNP committee forward policy 82.001 purchasing policy to council for consideration.
Thank you, Councillor. Call the question. All in favor? It's carried. Brings us on our last one here. I get a motion going to closed session. 23. Councillor Prestige.
Make a motion to go into closed session.
Thank you, Counselor. Call the question, all in favor? Okay, we're back. Motion coming out of here, Counselor Prestige.
Make a motion that Governance and Priorities Committee direct administration. No, that's not right. Governance and Priorities Committee,
Accept discussion.
yeah, accept discussion as for information.
Thank you. With that, I'll call the question, all in favor? That's carried. Counselor Burrows, you want to do the honor, number 9?
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Thank you. I'll get you on the paper here. With that, I'll call the question, all in favor?